Well, the Zags jumped out to a 15-2 lead and never really let USC back in the game on Saturday. We got all sorts of discussion on that game and this team's future on today's Mailbag edition of the Locked On Zags podcast.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. Folks, these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster, and they do it for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. Happy Monday, folks. I apologize about my voice. A couple days in Las Vegas watching this Gonzaga team, and you start to lose your voice. So that's where we're at right now. I also want to shout out the Lady Zags very quickly here. Big win over the Stanford Cardinal at home. Monster game for them. Brina Maxwell looked incredible. Vonnie Ejim posted a double-double. We didn't get any mailbag questions about this game because all of our mailbag questions were submitted prior to the end of this contest on Sunday. But I'm going to tell you right now, Tuesday's show, we're going to cover a lot about what this means for Lisa Fortier's program, whether the Zags will be ranked or not. We'll know that on Tuesday. We'll talk about that, the rest of their non-conference schedule. So if you're looking for an update on the Lady Zags after that big win over Stanford, just know it's coming your way on Tuesday. So for now, we're going to get right into Mailbag Monday. Again, if you want to get involved in Mailbag Monday, you can email me, andypatton013@gmail.com. You can also join our Discord channel. It is free to join. There is a link in the show notes here, whether you're on audio or video. Click on that link. You'll be joined for us. Again, it's completely free, 24/7. There's an entire channel dedicated to asking mailbag questions. You can get your questions answered there. First question here comes from Jeff via Gmail. Jeff says, between UCLA and USC, which win do you think will age better come March? Could we be looking at USC and UCLA being the second and third best teams in the Pac-12? So both will end up being fantastic wins. Well, for starters, I'm going to push back on the notion that the second and third best teams in the Pac-12 automatically equal fantastic wins for Gonzaga. We're just not in that era anymore. Gonzaga dominates the Pac-12 conference. USC and UCLA probably will end up being the second and third best teams in the conference. That is the trend that we're seeing right now. Part of that is because teams like Colorado and Oregon, who are kind of expected to be in that competition, just haven't looked all that good. I will shout out Oregon for beating Michigan over the weekend in not in overtime, but it was a game-winning shot, 86-83. Really nice shot from freshman Jackson Shellstad there. But really, yeah, I think USC and UCLA are the second and third best teams in the Pac-12. I also think they'll both be ranked at points this season. Neither of them were ranked when Gonzaga played them. USC began the season ranked. They had that loss to Irvine, and they had that loss to Oklahoma, which kind of has kept them out of the top 25 now with a loss to Gonzaga. They're a ways away. But when Bronny James returns, if they do well in the Pac-12, if they clip USC, if they clip Arizona, which that would really help, and then I think there's a chance they're in the top 25. UCLA just isn't in their final form, to be perfectly honest. Those freshmen are so underdeveloped yet, but Mick Cronin is very good at this. I think Burke B is going to be a fantastic player for them. I think Ade Mara is going to take a step forward for them. I think Jan Vide, if we're talking international, even Sebastian Mack, I think those guys are going to step up. So I wouldn't be surprised to see both these wins actually age pretty well, but I don't think that I don't know how much it's going to really move the needle. For Gonzaga, they got UConn and Kentucky. They're two big games coming up. Kentucky took a hit with their loss to UNC Wilmington over the weekend, but those are the two big games that are really going to help define Gonzaga's season in terms of their seeding based on their non-conference, especially with the WCC just looking a lot weaker than it's looked in years past. Next question here comes from Austin via Discord. Austin says, the three-point shooting has finally arrived. Do you think we will see more shooting like this? I mean, I hope so. I don't think 12 of 22, which is what Gonzaga shot against USC, is necessarily sustainable all that often. That's pretty fantastic. You don't see that much. But I also think Gonzaga is a better three-point shooting team than we saw in Maui. I think basically every team that played in Maui is a better three-point shooting team than what they showed in Maui, because I think that there was a lot of challenges shooting on that rim in Hawaii and Honolulu. I was going to say in Maui. It wasn't technically in Maui, and we saw a lot of teams really struggle to shoot there. So I think it's going to really come down to Nembhard and Hickman and how they shoot. Dusty showed some fantastic stuff in this game. He has grown already as a college basketball shooter just in his first 7 games, which is incredible to see the level of confidence that he has showed, the level of outside shooting that we just didn't see from him early in the season. And of course, Ben Gregg, Braden, Huff. Even Graham Ike and Anton Watson have brought that three-point shooting in the front court as well. But at the end of the day, the three-point shooting is going to be defined by how Hickman and Nembhard can shoot. They are much better than they were in Maui. They were much better than they have been in the early part of the season. And I think, while I don't think we're going to see a bunch of 12 of 22 performances necessarily, it is pretty clear to me that this team is a better three-point shooting team than they were in the first couple of weeks of the season. And I expect that to continue to bear itself out over the rest of the season. Another one here from Austin via Discord. Austin says, is it just me or did it look like GU gave up the offensive boards to rush back on defense, perhaps to stop USC's transition offense? No, not really, to be honest. It might have just been you, my friend. Gonzaga averages 14.1 offensive rebounds per game. That is 24th in the country, so they're a top 25 offensive rebounding team. They also had exactly 14 offensive rebounds against USC. So if averaging 14 per game is top 25 in the country and they racked up 14 offensive boards against USC, I think it's safe to say that that's not the kind of performance where they're giving up offensive boards. Gonzaga did get back on defense as a way to prevent USC from getting out in transition. That is something we saw them do. But frankly, USC is a bad rebounding team. For those of you who listened last week when we had Matt Zemek on of Trojans Wire, he talked a lot about how he thought that the big thing that might derail USC from being able to pull off an upset here was their lack of rebounding. And frankly, that is what happened in this game. A lot of what he said Gonzaga needed to do, prevent Collier from getting to the rim, make him settle for outside shots, crash the glass. Like, that is what happened, and that is what led to Gonzaga securing a victory here. So we had some really good insight from Matt on Friday's show, which I was really happy to see that kind of come together the way that it did. Of course, happy to see Gonzaga get a win as well. But I think the offensive rebounding was actually a strength for Gonzaga in this game and not something that they were really going away from. Final question here in the first segment comes from Jeff via Gmail. Jeff says, who had the better game off the bench against USC, Huff in the first half or Gregg in the second half, or were they both equally good? Yeah, it was Ben Gregg, but they were both very good. I don't want to say that to denigrate anything that Braden Huff did, but Gregg was better. His overall game was certainly better. He had 14 points and 8 boards and 2 assists. Braden Huff only had 2 rebounds. He only had 0 assists. He didn't have any assists, I should say. He missed a couple bunnies at the rim again. I don't think Braden Huff's performance was bad, but he had that breakaway lay-in that he just missed. He had a little floater that he missed. We saw the outside shooting look really good from him. But Ben Gregg, his performance, especially in the second half, it was what helped Gonzaga kind of maintain that lead. USC kept trying to chip into it. They'd get within 11. They'd get within 9. And then something would happen to keep Gonzaga back up by 12, back up by 14, back up by 15. And it was a really kind of professional win. I saw it described that way somewhere. I apologize. I can't remember where, so I can't give credit there. But a professional win in the sense that Gonzaga jumped out to a lead and then never really let USC back. I know they got close at the end of the first half, but in the second half, any runs that they made, any stretches of performance they had somebody stepped up for Gonzaga and knocked down a big shot and kind of quieted them. And in the second half, a lot of the time it was Ben. Ben had 2 really huge threes. He crashed the glass incredibly effectively in this game. And while I thought both backup bigs played well, I thought Ben Gregg had the better performance in this one. His activity on defense, again, his offensive rebounding, his defensive rebounding for that matter, the outside shooting, the energy, the enthusiasm that he brought, I thought was a really, really good vintage Ben Gregg performance and one that I think Gonzaga really needed to keep that USC team away in the second half. We're going to talk about what this Gonzaga team's ceiling might be, how the defense has improved so much this year. We're going to get into all that and more after a word from today's sponsor, LinkedIn Jobs. Folks, these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You all want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best and most qualified candidates available, and that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, which helps find the right people for your team faster, and they do it for free. It's super easy to create a free job post, and then all you have to do is put the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. From there, simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates who have just the right skills and experience so that you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and ultimately hire. That's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus the leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, folks. I want to thank all of you for making Locked On Zags your first listen or your first watch of the day. I want to shout out those everyday listeners, those of you on Discord. Shout out those of you who came and said hi to me before the start of the Gonzaga USC game in Las Vegas. Met with a handful of you. Really appreciate getting the opportunity to see some of you. That was extremely cool. So thank you again for those of you. I'll be at a couple more games this year. Hopefully at least one in Spokane. Still working on that. Definitely going to be at the Gonzaga UConn game in Seattle. So definitely, if you're there, come say hi. We'd love to meet some more of you. But want to get into more of the mailbag questions today. We got a handful of really good questions here. This one comes from Nivek Sivad on Discord. He says, yesterday's impressive win over USC demonstrated what this team can do on any given night. Looking ahead, Connecticut, Kentucky, and possibly San Diego State look like the only serious roadblocks to the Zags winning out the rest of the season. What do you think our chances of winning out the regular season, and which games should we be concerned with most that could stop that from happening? UConn. Absolutely UConn, 150% UConn. UConn is extremely good. And I know they lost to Kansas over the weekend. And I know, obviously, Gonzaga didn't lose over the weekend. And that can be maybe give a lot of confidence for the Zags. And I want to be clear, the Zags can absolutely beat UConn. 100% they're capable of doing it. But UConn is really good. I mean, this team is really good. I think they're probably the talent-wise third, maybe even second best team in the entire country. They're not ranked that high. I didn't rank them that high on my rankings at Locked On College Basketball because of the loss to Kansas. It's kind of unfair to jump them over Kansas in that situation. I think I have them 5th or 6th in my rankings, but this is a really incredibly talented team. And if they're at full strength with Stephon Castleback, man, this team is going to be really, really hard to beat. They're a great rebounding team. They're a great shooting team. They're a great scoring team. They're a great defensive team. That, again, doesn't mean Gonzaga can't beat them, but that's going to be a really, really, really tough game. Outside of that, yes, Kentucky, San Diego State are good ones to mention. Kentucky is probably going to be better in February than they are now. They just got one of their big men back against UNC Wilmington. Aaron Bradshaw only played 13 minutes, but he's a top 3 prospect in the class playing his first college game. Once DJ Wagner's healthy, if Bradshaw's back, if they get Ugena and Yenso back, who's also been out with injuries, the freshmen are going to be better in February than they are now. Like, Kentucky's a dangerous team, and that game's on the road. I'll put it this way. If Gonzaga wins both those games, I'm going to be very, very surprised. Thrilled, extremely happy, but surprised. Those teams are both really good, and playing Kentucky on a true road environment is really tough. San Diego State is good. I think Gonzaga should win that game, especially at home. And I also don't want to just assume that they're going to sweep the WCC. Yes, the WCC is down this year. There's no debate about that. There's just not. It's down this year. San Francisco looks good. They lost to Arizona State. That's a tough, not a super damaging loss for them, but not a great loss either. Santa Clara lost over the weekend as well. Like, this conference is just struggling right now. But to assume Gonzaga is going to win every game in the conference, I don't think is fair either. I don't even know if they're going to beat every game against St. Mary's, even though, I mean, we talked about it already. St. Mary's is not good this year. Their loss to Boise State, I mean, this is just not a good team at this point. But Randy Bennett always plays up for Gonzaga. So I think Gonzaga ends up with as a 3 or maybe a 4-loss team. I think that gets them the 3 seed. That's my prediction right now. Some people might be disappointed by that, might think that that's too low on Gonzaga, but their depth is something that still concerns me going later and further into the season. And really, they just have some really, really good games left. Do I think they're capable of winning out? Of course. Of course, beating UConn and Kentucky is going to be very difficult. But this team has proven they are very, very good. And outside of really a crappy half against Purdue, they've proven they're capable of beating everybody that they've played this year. So I certainly wouldn't rule it out, but I expect them to be more like a 3, maybe a 4-loss team when all said and done. Next question here comes from Christian via Gmail. Christian says, Mark, Few mentioned mucking things up prior to the USC game, and it seems like this is indicative of the Zags style and as articulated in the defense and rebounding. How would you describe the Zags style this year? Any insights after watching the game live? Well, I wasn't subjected to Jay Williams, who was the color commentator for this game on ESPN. I'm kind of glad about that. He is not my favorite broadcaster, let's put it that way. So that certainly helped in terms of what my insights for watching the game live. Yeah, I think the Zags are more chaotic on defense. They're more aggressive, certainly, more likely to intercept the passing lanes, more likely to try to knock the ball loose. And they've done it in a pretty good way without committing too many fouls. Certainly the UCLA game notwithstanding, where everybody was getting called for fouls for just everything that happened on the court. But we've seen Anton Watson be the usual player that he is, a kind of a chaos machine, knocking the ball loose, getting steals, getting out in transition. But Dusty Stromer's been doing that as well. Nolan Hickman's hands have improved tremendously on defense. His ability to knock the ball loose has been key. Graham Ike and Ben Gregg are better at hedging screens than most of Gonzaga's bigs in the past. Graham's really, really good at hedging screens. It's one of the best strengths he has defensively. So I just think this team is more chaotic, more aggressive, more energetic on defense, more likely to take risks, which can lead to getting burned. And it has in plays for Gonzaga this year, but it hasn't really led to like a full game of them just getting torched defensively. We haven't seen that. Hopefully we don't. UConn and Kentucky, going back to that question, are the two teams that are the most capable of really exploiting defensive mistakes and over-aggression on defense. But so far, Gonzaga's defense has looked really, really good. And that's what I want to talk about in this next question here, which comes from Pete22909 on Discord, who says Gonzaga's KenPom adjusted defensive efficiency ranking is 18th. And using the eye test, the Zags seem more aggressive this season. Has Coach Few placed a greater emphasis this season on defense? Do you expect this year's team to be one of the better Gonzaga teams in terms of overall defense? Are our current team members better skilled at defense than previous teams, despite the loss of Hunter Salas? And is Ben Gregg the defensive spark plug? Well, we're taking these one by one. I doubt Few has placed a greater emphasis on defense. That implies that he has not placed as much emphasis on defense in the past, and I just don't think that is true for him. I just think they have the personnel that works better for what they want to do defensively. I think they've also altered a little bit of what they want to do defensively to fit the personnel, but I don't think it's necessarily an emphasis thing. I do still worry about, in terms of do you expect to be one of the better teams, I still worry about rim protection. It's still an area that's not really there. Graham Ike has proven to be a very, very good defensive player, and he uses his body well, and he uses his hands well to alter shots, but they don't have a true rim protector. And I think against really good teams with guards who can get to the basket, I think that could still present itself as an issue. I don't think it's going to be the best Gonzaga defensive team of all time, but it's certainly better than the Gonzaga defenses have been the last couple of years. Kind of already talked about the personnel. I think they just fit better for Gonzaga. I don't think they're necessarily a roster full of better defensive players than they've had in the past. I think it's just a better fit. Greg is a high energy guy. He had a good defensive game against USC, but frankly, I think he's their third best defensive big, and he is often out of position defensively. I've actually been somewhat critical of Ben Gregg's defense. His energy is phenomenal. If you're talking about him as a spark plug, overall, yes, he does provide that. But I think defensively, he still has some work to do to be a consistent anchor defensively. He is more of a, I'm going to go get the rebounds. I'm going to out hustle you for loose balls. But overall, his actual on-ball defense is an area where I think he has some growth still to do. We're going to close out today's show with a few more mailbag questions, all coming up after a word from today's sponsor, FanDuel. Folks, score early and often this college basketball season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 in your pocket if your team wins. So if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time than right now to get in on the action. The app is very, very easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. The Zags odds for the Final Four have actually dropped. They were 100-1 odds. Now they are 1,000-1 odds. If you're watching this team and what they did to USC and thinking, man, I think this team's going all the way to that Final Four, you drop $20, you can be $200 richer and super happy in late March when that Final Four rolls around. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the college basketball season. FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. All right, folks, closing out the show with a couple more mailbag questions here. This one comes from Austin via Discord. Austin says, the balanced scoring reminds me a lot of that first national championship team. Thoughts? Yeah, I've seen this a couple of times, and it was kind of a comparison made before the season. The great Stephen Carr, the actual initial host of the Locked On Zags podcast, SCarGo on Twitter. He now works in the Gonzaga production department. He kind of compared this team to the 2016-17 team before the season And I think that it does kind of work in a lot of ways. There's a key difference. The 2016-17 team had more depth, significantly more depth. They played 8 guys, played 12 or more minutes for that 2016-17 team. 8 guys played 12 or more minutes. The 9th guy, Brian Alberts, played 6 minutes per game. That's a big difference from this Gonzaga team, especially in terms of how it relates to the starters' minutes. Only one starter on the 2016-17 team played more than 30 minutes per game. Only one, and that was Nigel Williams-Goss, who played 32 minutes a game. That is a huge difference from this year's team, a massive difference. Yes, there are similarities. The 2016-17 team had 4 big men who all played legitimate minutes: Karnowski, Jonathan Williams, Zach Collins, Killian Tilly. This year's team, of course, has the 4 bigs who play as well: E.K. Watson, Gregg, and Huff. That team had Josh Perkins and Nigel Williams-Goss starting at point guard. This team, of course, has Nolan Hickman and Ryan Nembhard starting at point guard. Honestly, Steele Venters would have fit better. He would, in terms of comparing this team to 16-17, they would have had Steele Venters would have played that that Jordan Matthews role. Jordan Matthews, transfer, starting at the 3, really good outside shooter. The same thing as Steele Venters. Meanwhile, Dusty Stromer, the same thing as Jordan Matthews. Meanwhile, Dusty Stromer would have filled that Silas Melson role coming off the bench, playing 20-plus minutes per game, which is exactly what Silas Melson did. He was fantastic in that role. That would make this comparison make a little bit more sense. Obviously, that was the plan, and Steele's injury just kind of makes it so this team is a little bit less depth, a little bit less players they can go to and rely on. But the overall comparison in terms of balanced scoring and roster construction is very similar to that national championship team. Next question here comes from Jeff via Gmail. Jeff says, while the cases of Hank Gathers and Bronny James are not completely the same, is it crazy to think that LeBron is pushing his son back onto the court too soon after major heart problems, and this could have disastrous results similar to what happened to Hank Gathers? So I almost didn't answer this question because, frankly, speculating on a kid potentially dying on the floor feels extremely gross. I can't think of a better word, but I wanted to answer because I cannot disagree with it more. I absolutely cannot disagree with this more. Bronny has been to the best doctors in the country. He's been to the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. He has been cleared by the best doctors on the planet. He has been cleared by the USC team doctors. He has been cleared by every single person that has been in contact with him. The best the best professionals on the planet have been checking out Bronny James and making sure that this is okay. I have not seen LeBron seeming in any way, shape, or form to be overly pushy regarding Bronny returning to the floor. They have released statements saying he has been cleared, he is practicing, he is doing this. I have not seen, we're hoping to get him back by this date, we're hoping to do this. Like, I haven't seen, I think in order to see that, you have to be looking for it. It feels like people are looking for ways to denigrate LeBron's, I guess, being a dad. I'm not sure what it is, like saying that he's doing this wrong, he's handling this incorrectly. And I just don't see that at all. It feels like people are making up a narrative there that doesn't exist. Vince Iwuchukwu, who's a backup center for USC, he played in that game against Gonzaga on Saturday. He suffered cardiac arrest in July of 2022. Same exact timeline as Bronny. Very weird coincidence for this to have happened 2 years in a row at USC in the same month. But Iwuchukwu returned in early January for USC after having the same injury. That's the same timeline that Bronny is on. So making some kind of expectation prediction, feeling like Bronny's being rushed back and that something terrible is going to happen, is just looking for some kind of conflict, some kind of controversy, some kind of way to criticize the James family that just isn't there. They haven't done anything wrong, and they have followed all the procedures and protocols, and they've done everything to make sure Bronny is fully safe and healthy before he returns to the floor for the Trojans. Final question here on the show comes from Dawson via Gmail. Dawson asked this a couple weeks ago, but we didn't get to it until now. So thanks for being patient on that one, Dawson. Question is, the controversy around the turquoise Nike N7 jerseys got me thinking about which have been Gonzaga's best jerseys through the years. I'm curious to hear your top 5. Yes, this is a fun question. I've gotten it a handful of times in my podcasting career here about the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Always happy to answer it. Talk about some of my favorite uniforms in Gonzaga's past. For the record, I liked the turquoise N7 jerseys. I like that they are honoring Native American heritage. I think that's a cool thing that Gonzaga does. I know some people don't like them because they're not their colors, whatever. I understand that. Those turquoise jerseys, I can see why some people are like, hey, that's not my thing. And I wouldn't argue with anybody in that situation, but I personally like them. I thought they were kind of a nice touch. One of my favorite jerseys, we don't see the men wear this. The women wear it more regularly, which is always fun when you get to see a chance to see them wearing them. But those red alternates that were really popular in the Adam Morrison era, I know there's some great pictures of Morrison wearing them. Those are some of my favorites. I really wish we got to see Gonzaga's men's team wear some red alternates consistently, or at least at all, because we just really haven't seen them in a super long time. I also really like the regular Navy away jerseys from like the 2012, 2013, 14 era that just said Zags on the front. Those are two uniforms between the red alternates and those those Navy away jerseys that I really liked. I also like the first Phil Knight Invitational jerseys, the PK80s. The black and the red ones. I still have a pair of shorts from that era that I wear pretty regularly. Those are some of my favorite jerseys. And I also really like the white Zags they wore in the UCLA win in 2021. The Jalen Suggs iconically jumping up on the scorer's table, like the white jersey. You guys can all picture it with Zags on the front. Those are some of my favorite jerseys right there. I'm not somebody who's a huge jersey person. I know some people are a lot more concerned about what they're wearing and pay more attention to all the different alternates year in and year out. To be honest, it's just never really been something that has been that concerning to me or something I pay that much attention to, but there are definitely some that really stand out for me. I think I gave 4. I'll give a fifth one. It's just the kind of generic blue Gonzaga jerseys from like the Austin Day era that just said Gonzaga on the front. I have one of those jerseys that I was given a long time ago. And so I think I'm a little bit partial to that just because it's something that's in my closet right now. But a lot of great jerseys for Gonzaga in the past. I know some people didn't love the grays that they wore against Bakersfield. And there have been some jerseys that aren't my favorite as well. But they've also had some really, really good ones and hoping to see some more creative ones going forward. That's going to wrap us up for today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Again, we'll be back on Tuesday discussing the new AP poll when that comes out. We'll give our keys to the game against Arc Pine Bluff, who Gonzaga plays Tuesday afternoon. We'll also talk about the Lady Zags, who will hopefully be in their AP top 25 after defeating Stanford at home on Sunday. All that coming up on Tuesday here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Available wherever you get your podcasts, also available on YouTube. Check us out there if you have not done so yet. Join us on the Discord channel. We can talk about Gonzaga hoops, WCC hoops, women's basketball, all that stuff 24/7 on the channel. Over 250 people joined us there already. Click that link in the show notes. You can be one of them as well. Thanks for listening. And until next time, as always, go Zags.